If you think you know every hero's story from World War II, you're wrong. What happened in the skies above the Philippine Sea on November 17, 1944, defies everything you've been taught about warfare. Before this video ends, you'll witness an act so unprecedented that military historians still debate whether it was genius or madness. Hit that subscribe button right now, because this story deserves to be remembered. And I guarantee you've never heard anything like it. The morning air tasted like salt and aviation fuel. Lieutenant Commander James "Hawk" Morrison gripped the control stick of his Grumman, TBF Avenger torpedo bomber, as it climbed away from the USS Enterprise. Behind him sat radio man, petty officer David Chun, and turret gunner seaman Miguel Rodriguez. 3 men in a metal coffin, flying toward a Japanese convoy carrying reinforcements. To Manila, November 1944. The Pacific War had entered its bloodiest phase. Morrison had flown 40 combat missions. 42 times he'd cheated death. His crew called him lucky. He called himself careful. Today would test which assessment was correct. 8 Avengers would strike the convoy at dawn, escorted by 6 Hellcat fighters. Get in fast, drop torpedoes, get out faster. Simple on paper, deadly in execution. "Hawk, we've got company." Chun's voice crackled through the intercom. 2 o'clock high, Zeros inbound. For Mitsubishi Zero fighters dove from the cloud cover. Like angry hornets, the Hellcat escorts peeled off to engage, but 2 Zeros broke through, their 20mm cannons spitting fire at the bomber formation. "Hold tight," Morrison said, his voice steady despite his racing pulse. "Rodriguez, keep those guns ready." The first Zero screamed past, so close Morrison could see the pilot's leather cap. Rodriguez's twin .50 calibers roared in response, brass. Casings raining down into the turret. I'm hit. Lieutenant Davis, flying Avenger 3, watched his aircraft shudder, black smoke pouring from its engine. The plane spiraled toward the ocean 3,000 feet below. "Dave is bail out." Morrison shouted into his radio, but Davis's response never came. The Avenger plunged into the Philippine Sea with a white geyser that disappeared almost instantly. 3 more Americans swallowed by the Pacific. "Target at 12 o'clock, 5 miles, Chun reported. "Convoy in sight." Through the morning haze, Morrison spotted them. 7 Japanese merchant ships in tight formation, surrounded by 3 destroyers. The destroyers' anti-aircraft guns were already traversing skyward, waiting. "All Avengers, this is Hawk," Morrison said. "Stagger your approach. Don't give them a single target line. Execute on my mark." Morrison pushed his control stick forward, diving toward the largest transport ship. The altimeter unwound rapidly. 3,000 feet, 2,500, 2,000 . The world exploded. Japanese anti-aircraft guns opened fire simultaneously. The sky became a nightmare of black puffs, red tracers, and white-hot shrapnel. Morrison threw the Avenger into violent, evasive maneuvers, his body pressed hard against the seat. 1,500 feet, Chun called out, his voice tight with fear. A shell burst directly ahead. Metal fragments punched through the aircrafts. Aluminum skin. Morrison felt the control stick jerk in his hands as shrapnel severed hydraulic lines. "We're losing pressure," Morrison shouted. "Rodriguez, you okay back there?" "Still breathing, sir." "But we've got holes everywhere. 1,000 feet. Morrison steadied the aircraft, lining up the transport ship in his bomb sight. The Mark 13 torpedo weighed 2,216 pounds. Dropping it required precision timing, perfect altitude, and exact airspeed. 800 feet. The transport ship grew larger in Morrison's vision. He could see Japanese sailors running across the deck, officers pointing skyward, gunners frantically tracking his approach. Steady, Morrison whispered to himself. 650 feet, the sweet spot. Morrison's thumb pressed down. The Avenger lurched upward as the torpedo dropped free. Morrison immediately threw the aircraft into a hard climbing turn. Behind him, the torpedo splashed into the water, its motor igniting as it knifed toward the transport ship. Hark! Brake left. Chun screamed. 0 on R6. Morrison jerked the control stick left. Not fast enough. A 20mm cannon shell smashed through the cockpit canopy, spraying glass fragments across Morrison's face. Pain lanced through his left cheek. Warm blood ran down his neck. The Zero pilot stayed glued to Morrison's tail, his cannons hammering away. Rodriguez fired back desperately, but the turret's traverse mechanism had been damaged. "I can't track him," Rodriguez shouted. Morrison dove toward the wavetops. The Zero followed, relentless. More cannon shells ripped through the Avenger's tail. Section. Warning lights blazed across Morrison's instrument panel. Oil pressure dropping. Fuel tank punctured. Engine temperature climbing into the red. They were dying. Slowly, inevitably, they were dying. Morrison's torpedo struck the transport ship amidships. Even through his desperate evasion, he saw the explosion. A column of water and steel debris erupted skyward. Men tumbled into the sea like toys. Morrison felt no triumph, only exhaustion. "We're not going to make it back to the carrier," Chun said quietly. The Zero fired again. This burst was surgical. The Avenger's engine coughed once, twice, then ceased completely. Silence descended over the cockpit, broken only by the whistle of wind through bullet holes. They were gliding now, maybe another 90 seconds before gravity claimed them. "Prepare for water landing," Morrison said. "Chung, get the life raft ready. Rodriguez, check your May West." Below them, the Philippine Sea stretched to the horizon. Beautiful, deadly. Sharks would come. They always came. And if sharks didn't finish them, thirst would. The Zero pilot made a final strafing run. It seemed almost contemptuous. The Japanese pilot knew the Americans were finished. He pulled up sharply and disappeared into the clouds. 50 feet, Chun reported. 40. 30. Morrison pulled the nose up slightly. The Avenger's belly smacked the water hard. Morrison's head snapped. Forward against his harness. Salt water exploded through the shattered canopy, filling the cockpit. Out, out now. Morrison screamed. Chun climbed through the top hatch, dragging the inflatable life raft. Rodriguez followed, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. Morrison was last, pushing his crew ahead of him as the Avenger began its final journey. To the ocean floor. They inflated the life raft just as the aircraft's tail lifted vertically. For a moment, the Avenger seemed to hang in the air, nose down in the water like a tombstone. Then it was gone. Morrison treaded water, watching the spot where his plane disappeared. 42 missions survived. Mission 43 had killed him, just more slowly than expected. The three men hauled themselves into the yellow life raft. They lay gasping, bleeding, alive but doomed. The USS Enterprise was over 100 miles east. No one was coming. How long you think we have? Rodriguez asked. Morrison checked the sun's position. Early morning. If search aircraft spot us, maybe we get picked up by tonight. If they don't. He didn't finish the sentence. Chun pulled out the emergency radio. His hands shook as he extended the antenna. Mayday, Mayday, this is Hawk Flight Leader. We are down in the water, coordinates approximately 14 degrees north, 122 degrees east. 3 souls aboard, 2 injured. Request immediate rescue. Over. Static hissed back. Chun tried again, and again. Only static answered. The first hour passed slowly. They took inventory. 1 canteen of water, 6 emergency ration biscuits, a signal. Mirror, 3 flares, a .38 caliber revolver with 6 bullets. Morrison knew its real purpose. When the suffering became unbearable, when rescue proved impossible, each man could choose his own ending. The second hour brought the sun. Its heat was brutal, reflecting off the water into their faces. They had no shade. Morrison rationed the water carefully, allowing each man to small sips. Tell me about your family, Morrison said to Chun. Chun smiled weakly. My parents run a restaurant in San Francisco. Best dumplings in Chinatown. I promised them I'd come back and help expand the business. His smile faded. Guess I'm breaking that promise. Don't talk like that, Morrison said sharply. We're getting rescued. Believe it. But Rodriguez was looking at the water, sir. We've got movement. 10 o'clock. Morrison's blood turned cold. A dorsal fin cut through the surface 30 yards away. Then another. Tiger sharks, drawn by the blood in the water. Morrison picked up the revolver, knowing how useless it was. The sharks circled lazily, not attacking yet, but establishing their claim. Morrison tightened his grip on the gun. 1 bullet for each of them, 3 left over. Better than being eaten alive. The third hour brought despair. Chun's radio remained silent. No aircraft appeared in the sky. The sun climbed higher, turning the life raft into an oven. Rodriguez developed fever from his head wound. Hey, stay with me, Morrison said, shaking the gunner gently. Don't you dare check out. That's an order. Rodriguez's eyes focused momentarily. Sir, I need to tell you something. The Zero pilot, when he made that last run, I saw his face. So, he was crying, sir. The Jap pilot was crying. Morrison went quiet. He'd spent 3 years killing Japanese, watching them kill his friends. It was easier when they remained faceless, inhuman, evil. But a crying enemy pilot complicated the narrative. War didn't create villains and heroes. It created men who killed each other for reasons neither fully understood. Doesn't change anything, Morrison said finally. He'd have killed us if he could. I know, Rodriguez whispered, but it matters that he cried. Means we're all human. Even in this hell, the 4th hour brought hallucinations. Thirst had progressed beyond discomfort into agony. Chun saw rescue aircraft that didn't exist. Rodriguez called out to his mother in Spanish. Morrison rationed the last of the water. They each got 1 final sip. After that, nothing. Their bodies would begin shutting down within hours. He thought about his wife, Margaret, back in Ohio. She'd be teaching her third-grade class right now, unaware her husband was dying half a world away. The truth was war had changed him. He'd seen too much death, delivered too much death. When the war ended, if he survived, he'd have to figure out how to become human again. The fifth hour brought acceptance. Morrison stopped checking the sky. The sharks had grown bolder, bumping the raft experimentally. Rodriguez had lost consciousness completely. Chun sat with his eyes closed, lips moving in silent prayer. Morrison picked up the revolver. He'd made his decision. When the sharks attacked, he'd shoot Chun first. Quick, painless. Then Rodriguez. Then himself. He was raising the gun when Chun grabbed his wrist. Wait, listen. Morrison heard nothing except wind and waves. There's nothing, no. Sir, engine. Aircraft engine. Morrison's heart hammered. Chun was hallucinating. But then he heard it too. Distant but unmistakable. The deep rumble of a radial engine. There! Rodriguez shouted, suddenly conscious again. 12 o'clock high. Morrison looked up. At first, he saw nothing. Then a dark speck resolved against the clouds. An aircraft. Diving toward them. But something was wrong. The silhouette was wrong. That's not one of ours, Chun said slowly. Morrison's stomach dropped. The aircraft was Japanese. A Nakajima B-6 and Tenzin torpedo bomber. It had probably been searching for American ships when it spotted their life raft. Get down, Morrison screamed. They're going to strafe us. But the Japanese bomber didn't attack. It circled the life raft once, twice, 3 times. Morrison could see the rear gunner clearly, his machine gun tracking their position. One burst would shred the life raft, kill all 3 Americans instantly. The Tenzin leveled out at 500 feet, approaching from the east. Morrison raised the revolver with shaking hands. Pointless. But if he was going to die, he'd die fighting. The bomber roared overhead. Morrison flinched, expecting bullets. Instead, something splashed into the water 20 feet away. A package wrapped in waterproof canvas. Morrison stared in confusion. Chun was already swimming toward it. He grabbed the package and hauled it back to the raft. Inside was 6 bottles of water, military ration packs, a first aid kit, and a waterproof bag containing a map with coordinates marked in red pencil. The Japanese bomber circled one more time. Morrison looked up, meeting the rear gunner's eyes across 200 feet of empty air. The gunner raised his hand, not in threat, in farewell. Then the Tenzin banked sharply and disappeared into the clouds. Morrison sat stunned, clutching a bottle of Japanese water. What just happened? They saved us, Chun said, his voice filled with wonder. The enemy just saved our lives. Rodriguez was already drinking, tears streaming down his face. I don't understand. Why would they do that? Morrison remembered the crying Zero pilot. He thought about the Tenzin crew who'd just sacrificed precious supplies to rescue enemy combatants. These were men under orders to kill Americans, yet they'd chosen mercy over vengeance. Because we're all somebody's son, Morrison said quietly. All somebody's husband, brother, friend. The war makes us forget that, but maybe some people remember. They followed the coordinates on the map. 3 hours of paddling brought them to a small, uninhabited island. They spent 2 days there, surviving on Japanese rations and rainwater, before an American PBY Catalina spotted them during a search pattern. Morrison never learned the name of the Tenzin crew who saved them. Japanese military records from that period were destroyed, but he never forgot their act of humanity in the middle of inhumanity. Morrison flew 15 more missions before the war ended. He killed more Japanese soldiers, sank more Japanese ships, but something had changed. Every time he pressed the torpedo release, every time he watched an enemy ship explode, he wondered about the men aboard. Who among them might have chosen mercy given the chance? The final mission came on August 14th, 1945, 1 day before Japan surrendered. Morrison was flying cover over Tokyo Bay when his engine failed. He ditched in the bay, 3 miles from shore. A Japanese fishing boat reached him first. Old men and teenage boys, too young or too old for military service. They hauled Morrison aboard despite knowing he was an American pilot who'd probably bombed their cities. They gave him water, bandaged his cuts, took him to shore where American occupation forces were already landing. The old fisherman smiled and said something Morrison couldn't understand. The translator later told him it meant, "The war is over. We are human again." Morrison returned home to Ohio in November 1945. Margaret met him at the train station. The reunion was harder than expected. How do you explain to someone who'd never experienced war that you'd been saved by enemies? He tried resuming normal life, taught high school history, had 2 children, attended church on Sundays, but the war lived inside him like shrapnel the surgeons couldn't remove. Some nights he woke up drowning in the Pacific. Other nights he saw the transport ship exploding, Japanese sailors falling into burning oil. Years passed. Morrison never spoke publicly about the Tenzin crew. Military intelligence debriefed him, but his story about enemy combatants providing aid was classified. The narrative of World War II required clear heroes and villains. Morrison's experience complicated that narrative. In 1967, Morrison received a letter. It had been forwarded through multiple channels, arriving 23 years after the war ended. The return address was Tokyo. Inside was a single page, written in careful English. "Dear Lieutenant Commander Morrison, my name is Takashi Yamamoto. I was the pilot of the Tenzin bomber that found you in November 1944. I am writing because I will soon die, and I wanted you to know why we helped you that day. My gunner, Kenji Sato, had watched American bombers sink our carrier the previous week. His younger brother was aboard. When we saw your life raft, Kenji wanted revenge. He had his gun pointed at you. I ordered him not to fire. He asked me why we should show mercy to enemies who showed us none. I told him, because someone must remember we are human. Because if we become only killers, the war has already defeated us." Kenji lowered his gun. We dropped our supplies. I do not know if we made the right choice. War makes morality complicated. But I have lived 53 years since that day, and I have never regretted choosing mercy over murder. I hope you survived. I hope you found peace. The war ended long ago, but for many of us, it never truly ends. We carry it forever. Perhaps that is the price of surviving when so many did not. I wish you well, former enemy. Takashi Yamamoto. Morrison read the letter 3 times. His hands trembled. Margaret found him crying at the kitchen table, the first time she'd seen him cry since he came home from war. "What is it?" she asked gently. "Forgiveness," Morrison said. "Or maybe understanding. I'm not sure which." He wrote back immediately. His letter reached Tokyo 2 weeks later, but Yamamoto had already passed away. His daughter replied, saying her father had died peacefully, grateful he'd made contact before the end. Morrison lived to age 73. He died in 1991, surrounded by family. His children found his war memorabilia in the attic: medals, citations, photographs of young men who never grew old, and 2 letters, one from Morrison to Yamamoto, one from Yamamoto to Morrison, preserved in plastic sleeves. His daughter read both letters at Morrison's funeral. The church was packed. Veterans from multiple wars, students he'd taught over 3 decades. When she finished reading, silence filled the room. An elderly man in the back stood up. He'd flown B-17 bombers over Germany. "Your father never told us that story," he said quietly. "I wish he had. We all needed to hear it." Morrison's daughter nodded. He said the war taught him 2 things. First, that humans are capable of unimaginable cruelty. But second, that even in the darkest circumstances, humanity can survive. He said the Tenzon crew saved more than his life. They saved his soul. The story spread. Morrison's grandson wrote an article for a military history journal. Historians began investigating. Japanese military records were fragmentary, but they found references to a Tenzon bomber operating in the Philippine Sea during November 1944. The pilot's name, Takashi Yamamoto. The rear gunner, Kenji Sato. Further research revealed Sato had survived the war. He'd returned to Japan, opened a small bookstore in Osaka, lived quietly until his death in 1978. In his personal effects, researchers found a diary. The entry from November 17, 1944, read, "Today, I almost murdered 3 men who did not need to die. Captain Yamamoto stopped me. He said the war would end someday, but we would have to live with our choices forever. I did not understand then. I was angry, bitter, ready for revenge. But he was right. I have thought about those 3 Americans many times over the years. I am glad they lived. I am glad I did not kill them. Perhaps that makes me a poor soldier, but it makes me a man I can live with." Chun survived the war and returned to San Francisco. He expanded his parents' restaurant into a successful chain. He died in 1982, but not before establishing a scholarship fund for children of veterans, American and Japanese alike. "My life was a gift," he told his children. "I'm paying it forward." Rodriguez returned to Texas, married his childhood sweetheart, raised 5 children. He became a teacher, like Morrison, specializing in conflict resolution. When asked about his war experience, he'd say, "I learned that enemies are just people you haven't met yet, and mercy is stronger than revenge." Kenji Sato's grandson, born in 1975, became a documentary filmmaker. In 2014, 70 years after the incident, he released a film about his grandfather and Morrison. The film included interviews with Morrison's children, Chun's grandchildren, Rodriguez's family, and elderly Japanese veterans who'd known Yamamoto. The film's title, The Empty Gunned. It referenced Sato's moment of choice, when he pointed his weapon at helpless men and chose not to fire. The film won multiple awards. More importantly, it sparked conversations. Veterans from both sides watched it together at screenings in Tokyo and Washington. Tears flowed freely. Former enemies embraced. Old wounds began healing. At one screening in Hawaii, an elderly Japanese man approached Morrison's daughter. He was 92, bent with age, but sharp-eyed. "I was on the transport ship your father sank," he said through a translator. "I lost many friends that day. For years, I hated American pilots. But your father's story helped me understand. We were all following orders, all trying to survive. Hatred is easy. Understanding is hard. Your father chose the hard path." Morrison's daughter hugged him. This man her father had tried to kill 7 decades earlier. They stood together, two people connected by violence, choosing reconciliation over resentment. The documentary ended with a question posed to viewers. If enemies in the worst war in human history could choose mercy, what excuse do we have for choosing hatred in times of peace? Morrison's story proves that even in circumstances designed to strip away humanity, individual choices matter. Yamamoto chose to help enemy combatants at personal risk. Sato chose not to fire his gun. Morrison chose to tell his story despite official classification. Each choice rippled outward, creating consequences they could never have imagined. The war ended 81 years ago as of 2025. Every year, fewer veterans remain. Soon, none will be left to tell their stories firsthand. Morrison's story survives because he chose to write it down, and his family chose to share it. But how many other stories died with men who couldn't speak about what they'd experienced? How many acts of mercy happened in the war's shadows, witnessed only by participants who took their secrets to the grave? Morrison's legacy lives. His grandson teaches conflict resolution at Georgetown University, using his grandfather's story as a case study in choosing humanity over tribal loyalty. Chun's great-granddaughter runs a non-profit promoting reconciliation between former wartime enemies. Rodriguez's descendants serve in the military, carrying forward his belief that true strength lies in mercy, not vengeance. And somewhere in Japan, Takashi Yamamoto's family tends his grave, where the inscription reads, "A soldier who remembered he was human. War doesn't decide who's right, only who's left. The men who survive carry the weight of those who didn't. They live with impossible memories, unbearable choices, and the knowledge that fate's caprice determined why they breathed while others drowned. But survival isn't enough." Morrison could have buried his story, let it die with him. Instead, he testified to a truth that military propaganda preferred to hide. Enemies are human too. Killing them doesn't make you evil, but refusing to see their humanity makes you less than you could be. The guns fell silent in 1945, but the choice between hatred and understanding continues every day. Morrison chose understanding. Yamamoto chose mercy. Sato chose not to fire. These weren't grand gestures that ended the war. They were small, individual decisions that reminded everyone involved that humanity could survive, even inhumanity. Morrison's final journal entry, written 3 days before his death, read, "I've spent 46 years trying to understand why I survived when so many didn't. I've concluded there's no cosmic reason, no divine plan, just random chance and human choice. But here's what matters. I got more time. Time to love my wife, raise my children, teach young minds. That time was a gift from strangers who became my salvation. I can't repay them. They're dead. But I can honor their choice by choosing mercy when hatred would be easier. That's the only way to win a war that never truly ends. He died 3 days later, having lived a life that testified to the possibility of redemption even in war's aftermath. His funeral drew veterans from 3 wars, students from 5 decades, and a Japanese delegation that included Yamamoto's family and Sato's descendants. Former enemies stood together, united by a story about the moment warfare paused and humanity broke through. The documentary filmmaker, Sato's grandson, spoke at the funeral. My grandfather pointed a gun at Lieutenant Commander Morrison and chose not to fire. That choice defined the rest of his life. Morrison carried the same burden. He killed many of my countrymen in service to his nation, but he never forgot that his enemies were human. That remembrance cost him peace, but it gave him wisdom. And wisdom, passed down, is how we prevent future wars. Morrison's story proves that individual humanity can survive institutional inhumanity. One pilot, one bomber crew, one moment of mercy. It didn't end the war, but it saved 3 lives, and those 3 lives created families, taught students, built businesses, and spread a message that hatred isn't inevitable. That's the final twist in Morrison's story. The hero wasn't Morrison. It was Yamamoto, and Sato, and Chun, and Rodriguez, and every person who chose humanity when inhumanity was easier. Heroes don't always win battles. Sometimes they just refuse to become monsters. And in a war that created monsters daily, that refusal was its own form of victory.